So week 3 ends, and there is a little bit of stuff to do. We're going to go through some other pieces in here really quickly, and we're going to show you. So the other day we showed you the live virtual machine, so you could get used to that idea. And again, if you do that, I encourage you, whether you're online or in campus, to do that on your own computer. It's different than just doing the simulations. I really think it is. So today we're going to look at something called ZenMap, and so we're going to actually download and show you how to get it, how to install it. It's a really great resource and a tool if you need to do some network work. I want to go through what all needs to be turned in by Sunday. And in fact, I'll make a little exception because I know Cengage has been, or our bookstore has been slow on sending out. So I've got some people who are still waiting or were waiting until the other day to get their access code, even though they had paid at the very first week. Again, I'm going to recommend, if you can do it, go buy it directly from Cengage if you haven't, rather than go through our bookstore. But if you're needing that book voucher, of course, you're kind of a little stuck. In week 3, so of these items up here, this Lab 2-1, we're going to actually download and show you what that looks like on your computer, a very similar tool. Lab 2-2 install Ubuntu, well, that's very much like what we did actually live in class, so that one should be fairly easy. There's a review and a reinforce. Those don't add any points to necessarily to your score. Neither does the crossword puzzle. But the quiz does. And so hopefully the quiz actually is functioning as intended. The other one that I see a lot of people have not contributed yet to are the discussion boards. And so because of this year and the weirdness of it, I will let you go ahead and do the discussion boards. I have not plugged zeros in. So I have some people who have not taken the time to introduce yourself. Please make sure if you're in that list that you do that. It's not a ton of points. It's 100 points out of 6,000, but it adds up. Week 2 discussion board. Week 2 discussion board. Only about half of the students in this class have actually done that. Go through and do that and get the points for it. I think it's, I do it for a reason. I don't do it just because I want to entertain you. But go out and look at those. It will probably surprise you. The assignment for this week, this discussion board. I think this should be eye-opening. And we do one very similar in when we do the cybersecurity, but I think it's a great idea, and I throw it out there. If you do this assignment and you are not scared, then you should probably take the cybersecurity so I can finish scaring you in the spring. Most people are going to find they reuse a number of passwords. Is that safe? No. It's not. It's very, very dangerous. And in fact, think about the passwords you reuse. If you lose that password to your bank that you also use at your retirement, that you also use to log in to get your payroll, it can be very, very detrimental. So this one I think is a really great one. I am not making you respond, but it also gives me data that then when we do the cybersecurity class, I go, yep, this is the number of students, this is what their responses were, and we can actually look at that and see what happens. When I did a very similar study at a fairly small, so it's not a huge N number, but I looked at some medical practices, and we just did some basic surveys, and they did something very similar. The average physician in that group had 192 passwords to try to remember, or places they should have had passwords. Do you think they were reusing passwords? And this is your health data. This is logins to things where they could do e-prescribing. And they didn't. And so what I used it for was a push that they should participate in something called a single sign-on system. In other words, you remember one master password that you change on a fairly regular basis. The system then goes out and changes passwords and keeps track of everything else behind the scenes. So in this case, We were not using LastPass, but I use LastPass as a personal tool. And the free version does pretty well. I buy the paid one. But there are other models out there and other things out there. But what I want you to be aware of is how dangerous that is, how many passwords we use. Sometimes we don't even think about them all. And find something that's going to work as a solution that's more effective. So sticking to passwords. So the latest one I found, and I'll share what this is kind of interesting. We used to find them, they were stuck on sticky notes on the monitors. Well, you'd go around and do a compliance audit, or you just go yell at people, and they go, no, that's, so that kind of went away. And then it was on the pull-out keyboard drawers, or on that pull-out drawer where they had all their pencils and pens. Hey, I'm not going to look there. There's probably a book there that's got all the passwords. So this is where I have found the latest example of people hiding passwords. Now, it's actually a slightly more clever, but if you take your keyboard and you flip it over, notice there's some flat space. And, hey, they were putting passwords on there. Here's where it wasn't clever. I found one person was doing it not with like a sticky note or taping on a note. They were writing it in Sharpie. Come on, we can do better than that. All too often when I do little surprise things, I run into, and hopefully when you do your own, you're not going to find this. If it is some variation of the word password, take a step back and go, no. And if you think, but it's really clever because I used an O instead of a 0. Or I used a 0 instead of an O, like when you log into our own lab connections thing. Step back and go, no. Do you not think we're going to do those things? And we talk a lot about passwords and cybersecurity, but those patterns, I can predict what your passwords are based on the rules that we tell you to make them. So you're going to see that over and over again. So make sure you do that. And we should have some time in class today that you can start on some of these and hopefully finish those up. So what I want to do today is I want to torture you guys that are on campus and here. And we're going to actually install ZenMap here in the lab. And we're going to actually do a ZenMap scan here in the lab. So we got a couple of things we're going to do. So here is what I would like to do. And unfortunately, I got to sit down so you guys can't see my shiny bald head now. But you need to open up a browser window. We're going to have to download some software to do this. And so if you just put ZenMap and you browse for it, it's got a little bit of a strange address. It's nmap.org/ZenMap. So ZenMap is the graphical piece of a program called Nmap. So if I go to the download page, which is cleverly called nmap.org/download, or you can find it over here on the left as download, we're going to download this version right here. So Nmap 7.8 setup.exe. There's other ways to do it, and it's also available for Linux and other places if you want to do it. But we're just going to download here in the lab the Windows installer. And that's what you're going to do in the simulation also. So it should look very similar. So we're going to download this. And with all 10 of us, or however many are in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 of us, it shouldn't take too long to download. It's about 25 megs. So we're going to download and install Nmap. All right. When it is finished downloading, depending on which browser you're using, I'm using a Chrome browser, so it's down here at the bottom. I can actually go see it or just double click to open it. It, of course, first pops up that UAC. And I say, yes, I do really want to install it. And it says, oh, do I want to agree to install this software? Well, yes, I do. And all of these I can put in there. I'm going to leave the defaults there. Download folder, yep. And I'm going to go through its installation. This one installs really, really quick. As I say that, it comes to a crashing halt. There are a couple of programs we're going to use in class that depend on something that lives below this. And it's an interface to the network called WinPCAP. And so you're probably going to see a message about that if you're installing it in the lab. If you are installing it at your home and you've never installed Wireshark, which is another tool we're going to use, you probably won't get that error message. All right, so this is the message you will probably see, or one similar. So it says, oh, I'm going to put in WinCap. I'm going to agree to it. And I'm going to click install with the default installations. So what that is doing is it's putting in a interface between the network card and this software is what it does. Kind of a middleware if you want to look at it that way. Just click OK. Next. You can do all defaults. So it's going to give you a warning about it. It says, do you really want to install this other piece? And now it'll say NPCAP has been installed. And now it's going to finish. I'm going to let it create the start menu folder and the desktop icon just because it's handy. And then I'm going to click close. This is a fairly small program. Doesn't take a lot to download and install it. So to run this then, I can go around and find on the desktop, and it happens to look like this guy. Oops, I should have just moved it over. Sorry. So it looks like this, Nmap, and I'm going to run it. And it looks something like this. Well, that's not very intimidating, is it? No, pretty easy to look at. There are different command lines, and so we need to find some nomenclature on how to use this tool. So even though it's a graphical user tool, it's still, we have to figure out a few pieces with it. One of the things we want to do is we want to scan our network here. I don't know what that target or where I'm going to scan is yet. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a command line prompt, CMD. And so I'm going to, let me move it to the right window. So I have a command line prompt. I need to figure out what the network I am using, what some of its parameters are, before I can attack it with ZenMap. And so the thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do just an IP config, IPCONFIG, and it's going to tell me a little bit about my network. Now, it's going to say, oh, I have a loopback adapter and it's got an address, but that's not the one I need. And it's going to tell me I have this address, 192.168.56.1. That is actually that virtual address you created the other day when you did the VirtualBox. So 56.1 isn't where I want to be. But over here, I notice, oh, the IP address of this computer, 192.168.180.103. And I notice my gateway is 180.1. The subnet mask, and we haven't went into a lot of details about that, but the subnet mask also tells us a little bit about it, but we don't need to necessarily know that. What I want to know is, I said, all right, so it's 192.168.180 dot something. All the IP ranges in here range between .1, so 192.168.180.1, all the way to 255. So that's the range I want to figure out. So I have a target, and I pull it down, and hey, looks like I've done this before. So I can scan a single target. Now, it's kind of odd, but I'm going to scan this 168.180.5, and I'm going to hit scan. Oh, over here on the command line? All right, let me come back here. So what I typed was ipconfig. That's the most common thing we're going to ever open up a command line and type. Do it all the time, because I don't know when I walk in this door, I don't know anything about this network. And so ipconfig tells me a little bit about it. Now what it tells me is I've got npcap on here. This one, and I have to kind of recognize that number. It says, oh, I'm a virtual network. That 56 is kind of common to a lot of virtual stuff. This is the one I'm actually sending traffic out on. The other kind of a clue is, notice it doesn't have a gateway. A gateway is your link to the internet. And so when I don't have a gateway on there, that tells me that those addresses are kind of weird. All right, so let me go back to Nmap here. And so Nmap, I did a scan, and I scanned 192.168.180.5. Well, I'm assuming that there's a computer there, so let me see if I put that address in, if anything responds. 180.5. And what pops up, it tells me that that computer is a Windows server of some kind and is using Windows Internet Information Server. It should also tell you it's an old version of that. But that tells me I've hit a Windows server or something behind the scene there. And so I'm going to look at what it shows here at ZenMap. So ZenMap, and I'm going to scroll all the way up to the top here. ZenMap did what they called their intensive scan. So it went to that address, and it said, all right, here I'm scanning 192.168.180.5. And it pinged it and looked at it, and it discovered that that particular computer has all of those ports open. So your computer has an IP address that's 3 groups of octets. So 192.168.180. something. In addition to that, your computer has 65,536 ports or mailboxes, you might want to think about it. And they're used for different things. So on some of these, when I look at them, I know that port 25 is used for a send mail protocol. I know that port 80 is used for webmail. I know port 443 is secure sockets, or those websites that have the little padlock and they're secure. I don't know all of them, because I don't have all 65,000 of them memorized. But what that's telling me is those are all potential attack vectors into my computer. That those are openings. So my computer's got a wall around it, and those are all the windows that are left open, if you want to think about it that way. Well, I want to do a scan of another computer, and I want to see what happens. In this case, I'm going to change that 5 to 103, which is this computer here. And I'm going to do the same scan, and there it goes. In this case, of those open ports, it only actually had a few of those open. And some of them are a little weird, and so we'd have to do some research on them. But there's only a few ports open. So the 3389, that one I recognize weirdly. So if you've ever been in here and I have my iPad, and I'm controlling the screen with my iPad, that's the open port for that to go through from the Wi-Fi, from the iPad, back into the computer to remote control the screen. So it tries to do a lot of different things in there, and we can actually add more to it. It tells me a little bit about the computer, because the computer gives up some information. It says, oh, it's Windows 10 education model, and it tries to get some information about it. It's not perfect, but this is a great way to start figuring out what's on there. And so I can look at that network distance, so I can see that it's 1 hop. I don't have a lot of distance between it. So I can scan one computer at a time. That's kind of interesting. And there's some different types of scans. So if you pull that down, the profile has several that you can use. That command line, you can actually modify that to whatever you want to do. So even though it's the graphic model, there's actually the ability to create your own command line. Although if you're going to do it all command line, you might as well just install the non-graphic version. So I have another couple of options up there that seem interesting. You don't have those already pre-done. And because of the way Nmap works, we have a little bit more detail we need to give you. All right. Whose head likes to do math? Oh, at least one of you raise your head. So you'll notice it's got that slash and it's got a 24. So I'm going to put up here on a notepad, and maybe this is the easiest way to do it. I try to usually just draw on the screen, but that obviously isn't always going to work very well. So I'm going to put Notepad up here, see if I can format my font really big. Yeah, that'll be big enough, hopefully. So we said your IP address has 4 different pieces to it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, the reality is your computer's dumb. Can only do zeros and ones. And so a 0 or a 1 is called a bit as a refresher. We group 8 of those together. So that becomes a byte. That byte, if I do 2 and I multiply it by itself 8 times, so 2 times 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 2, if I got 8 of them in there, or 2 to the 8th power, is equal to 256. What it really means is I can represent a number in decimal, because there's 256 possibilities. I can represent a number between 0 and 255. So 0 is going to be equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's going to be 0, and 255 is going to be 1111, 1111. We'll go over how to convert those, but I'm giving you the kind of the shortcut, quick method. So your IP address up here is really a set of now that is not the same number. I'm just throwing it as an example. That's your IP address in binary. So that's what it really would look like, that format for it. All right. So the real quick thing I've got to tell you about is there should be 32 of those if I counted them right. Your IP address in IPv4 is 32 bits long. We have to tell, though, which part is what we call the network and which part we call the host. So the network side is the part we're given. The host part is the part we control on the inside. That subnet mask you saw in there, so your subnet mask, if you go back on your computer and you look at that subnet mask from the IP config, it's 255.255.255. that tells us where that sliding window is. And what we want to know is what position that lands at. And we'll go into a lot more detail on that, don't worry. But right now, I know that an address that goes 255, 255, 255 has 24 bits that are on the network side. And you're like, I don't understand that. Well, 255, so let me write it down here real quick. So 255.0 in binary is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I don't think I got enough ones in all of those. What it's saying, though, is there's 24 ones, and this is where we divide that address. And in fact, my beginning address is .1, 192.168.180.1 to 255. We can only in here control this piece. So in here I can have 255 approximately addresses. Well, that's enough for the computer lab, right? All right, long story around. We're kind of going really quickly. What that 24 does is where that point divides those two. Up here, that's the nomenclature we're going to use. So if I come up here to target, and I say I want 192.168.180.0/24, what it's going to do is try to get every IP address in there from 0 to 255. And I know that's a long way around to get there, but that's what's behind the scenes. So now if I hit scan, and I'm going to change my scan type a little bit here. I'm going to scan this with, let's just do a ping scan real quick. And that ping scan now tells me, and I did that because it pops up really quick. It scans and it just hits a single ping and says, these are all the computers that are live on my network. So 51, 53, 55, 56, 63, 89, 93. And so when you did your IP config, you're going to find your number in there in one of those. Those are all the computers and devices that responded to that ping. It doesn't tell me a whole lot about it. I get a little bit of information. I can say, oh, that one's got a BioStar network card, ASRock, BioStar. So it doesn't tell me a lot about it. But it gave me a real quick view of what's out there on this piece of the network. And so I can go, all right, so now that I know that, now I'm going to do an intent scan with all those TCP ports. And so remember, TCP is Transmission Control Protocol. So now it's going to take a lot longer because it's scanning every one of those addresses. So it's going to give us a report, and it says, oh, I found these open, I found this open, and it's targeting our entire network. If I pushed it out past our router, I could scan everything on the college's network, and Dr. Beardsley would probably come over and start yanking my head around going, stop that! Because we're looking at the entire network, and you can cause a lot of network traffic. If I push this out past the borders of Peru, I can't with an unmodified Nmap, but there are some modifications I can make to it. We can scan the entire internet. And with a decent connection, i.e. we were on a high-speed connection at UNL versus what we've got here, hour to 2 hours, we could scan every available IP address on the network. And that network being the internet, that means that entire range of a possibility of 4 billion addresses on IPv4, we've touched and tried to see if they've got an opening. Oops. So that's what Nmap. Nmap is powerful, and it can do a lot of different things. So notice here, we're sending, and you can see even here, it says 65,535 ports per host. And I said 65,536. What's the difference? Comes down to counting. When you start counting, what do you start counting with? The number 1. What does your computer start counting with? 0. So 0 to 65,535 is 65,536 ports. None of you guys caught me on that little thing, did you? You're like, oh my God, stop that talk. All right, so this is Nmap. Nmap is a great security tool, a great tool to discover what's out on my network. You do have to use a little caution. If you're at work and you decide to pull this off and you go, man, I'm just going to run Nmap and my administrator hasn't figured out a way to lock down my terminal so I can't do it, you can actually disrupt the network on the campus a little bit or whatever building you're at. And you're probably going to find some information that that security administrator doesn't want to know. So on our campus, if I did that, it might not be Gene Beardsley, it might be Curtis Carroll's at my door going, Brad, we need to talk about what you found again, and stop that. But when I walk in the door and I'm going to do an audit, I'm trying to figure out what's all on your network, well, here I know I've got a little better idea. I don't have to go physically touch every computer. I can start to get a better idea of what's out there. And one of the things you're going to find is, hopefully somewhere in there I get a response out of some things like a printer. Except my printer is turned off, and so it's not going to respond. Maybe some of these computers are turned off. But we're going to see what's all out there. And so one of the things that's interesting that I don't see that pops up is a couple of the switches, and I'm not really sure why they're not showing up. They should also show up. They've got an interface and some pieces. So there is a hierarchy to the IP addressing in this lab. So everything 51 and above is actually set up by something called DHCP that we're going to talk about that where they get given an IP address. So this is a great tool, and doing it just on that simulation, I think, loses a little bit of that power. There are actually versions of this that you can actually run off a flash drive. So if you want to be really sneaky and you really want to make that guy at your office mad or person, you can pop it in off a flash drive and run it. And so they took away your administrative rights on that computer, but guess what? You can still run it off a flash drive. You can plug in unauthorized devices and do all kinds of other things too, but it really is a great resource. And so now it's saying we're about 40% done. So it does take a while to scan, and in this case we've got about 40 devices. If you're on a really big network, so if we ran this scan from the administration building on the entire campus network, it might well take an hour or two to run and see what's out there. All right, so that's ZenMap, and there's a lot of different pieces to ZenMap. If this has got your interest, there is actually from that ZenMap where that site you were at, there is a mailing list that will mail you an email every once in a while, a digest. There are tutorials. There's information about how to use it. It is a great tool. The next tool I want to show you will also take a little bit to download. I'm going to go ahead and stop this one. Cancel for now and close anyway. All right, so the other tool I want to look at really quickly is you have to go into that live lab and you have to use a drawing tool to create a network diagram. So what they are showing you is a piece of something called LibreOffice. So if you go to LibreOffice.org, you can download LibreOffice. And I'm going through here pretty quickly. LibreOffice will take a little longer to download. It's about 250 megs. LibreOffice is a Microsoft Office competitor with one really big advantage. What's the cost of something called LibreOffice? 0. What does Libre mean? Free. Yeah. It is an open source effort, and I love open source stuff. That said, does it do everything Microsoft Office does? No. Yeah, I'm going to have you download it on your computer so you can actually use it. And that way I know it's on a couple machines. Yep. So if I don't have money to buy Microsoft Office, and that used to be the case, now what do we do with Microsoft Office? Are you able to grab it for free? Well, let's define free. The college is paying Microsoft, and so that's coming out of some of your fees and tuition and other things. But let's define free. So this particular program, the word processor is pretty decent. It lacks a few high-end features. If you're going to create a document, so you're doing a research paper and you want that really handy little database of all my resources, doesn't have that yet. All right. But it works really well. It can open Word documents really well, and it's free. So if you had a business, I might think about switching them over to this. The product called Calc works fairly well, and it will even do some fairly complex formulas. It will not do the Visual Basic macros. So if you've got somebody programming in some Visual Basic macros in Excel, they won't necessarily work. But for what most people do, 99% of the people, that works really well. It's even got something very similar to PowerPoint, and it works fairly well, except it doesn't have all the handy-dandy templates to lead you through. You have to do a little more on your own. The place where it's interesting is it has a database program. The database program is not compatible with Microsoft Access, which is kind of okay, but Access is not compatible with anything else either, so say neither here nor there. And if you had taken database with me, you would hear me whine about Access and how horrible it is in the entire world and why it shouldn't exist and different limitations for it. All right, this is still going. So this does have a lot of resources up top. It doesn't have as many resources once you actually have it running, and you'll see that. It also looks kind of like a 1980s version of Office. So there is a help, and there's installation. You can buy professional support. So if you're a company and you want to choose something like this, you may be willing to pay for some support to get it up and running. But the cost of Microsoft Office makes this a very appealing thing for a lot of companies. So I'm not sure what the college is paying because they do get some reduced rates. But the governmental rate to have Office 365 per year, per user, is $140. Well, that's not that bad. It's a little over $10 a month. But if you had 1,000 users, that's a big chunk of change. Big chunk of change. So, come on, download. My patience for downloads is sad. Almost there. Almost there. Oh, almost there. Some of you may have already finished the download. If you do, you can go ahead and click install. It's all defaults all the way through. So I should be playing like the Jeopardy music. Oh, sure, yours installed already or downloaded. And as a couple of them download, yours should speed up. in this case, I can't even really probably blame our campus network. I have a location where I have access to a 10 gigabit link to the internet in the world. Their speed is about so it's actually a limitation on their server side in this case. But again, the price says this is right. Dope. It has finally arrived. All right, so drag the installer over. All right. So I am literally just going to hit next and let it install. There is an option to allow it to start on your computer startup. If you're not using this all the time, I probably wouldn't do it. It just means it'll take a little bit longer for Calc or the writer or whatever it is you're using to start up the first time. Come on. Yep. Close a couple things. So in this case, I had something open that it didn't like that I had to shut down. And it may or may not like that anyway. You guys probably will not experience that issue when you were downloading it. Or did you? It says you need to restart. I've actually found it'll usually work. So if you don't want to restart, you should be able to do that. Let me see what my error message on mine is. Okay, try it. So mine has to do with I've got some things open on here that it doesn't like. Some shared files somewhere in a DLL library. Seems to have killed is my Alright, so now it says it's installed and it gives me a warning. I'm not going to reboot because I'm doing a recording right now, but if I now see what I've broken here. It's giving me the circle of doom. All right, so now it's put a new icon on the desk for LibreOffice. I'm going to click on that to run. And when I run that, slowly, ever so slowly, you'll notice that there is a lot of pieces to this. So There's the word processor, and I'll open one of those up. So it's got tips. And again, it looks like kind of a early version of Microsoft Word. But it actually functions really, really well for 90% of what we want to do. The calc looks the same. Impress is your presentation software. The tool that they are showing you is this drawing tool, and they're showing you and having you create a drawing of a network diagram in this tool. It's not a bad thing to have on your inventory list of, hey, I need to go do this. I can run out and go do that. Microsoft has a slightly better tool. They have something called Visio, and I love Visio. With our Azure Dev Tools for Teaching subscription, or whatever it's presently called, I can give you Visio Studio or Visio for free. Except you have to uninstall Microsoft Office 365. So I'm working on trying to find a solution for that. Visio is kind of the commercial version that will do a lot of stuff. So I would encourage you to try this. Play around with it. If you're at home and you don't want to pay for a Microsoft Office subscription, this is one of the tools that's out there for free. I throw it out a lot of places. Yes. So let me close out of here and open Word, and I will show you, or their program called Writer. So the weird thing is, let me open it again. So if I have a document here, the first thing I really need to do with this is I need to go to File, and I need to go to Options somewhere over there. Where is it now? Somewhere there's an Options piece. Maybe it's under Tools, Options. There it is. So Tools and Options. Under Load and Save, what it tries to do is save in its own format. So you'll see it saying it's a ODF text document. Well, if I do it and save it in this, I'm not going to be able to open it in Word. But if I pull this little pull down, and I can set that as a default, so I can always save it as a Word docx format. And so once I do this, so I got to go 3 minutes of setup, and it will save in formats that are always compatible. So now I've set it for text documents. I can also do the same for an Excel file or a spreadsheet. And I can say, oh, I need Excel format. And presentation, I want it as a PowerPoint. So now, whatever I save is going to be in a format that Word can open also, and Excel and or that. So it takes an extra 30 seconds to show people how to do that. But again, so your business, instead of having to buy 14 copies of Microsoft Office, you've just bought nothing and put it on there. And for most people just writing letters or responding to correspondence, it's really a pretty good option. The program that's missing from this suite, what program do we use a lot that's missing? We go out and get this thing called email with it, Outlook. So there is not necessarily a great Outlook competitor with this suite. There is a program called Thunderbird, and I've used it, but quite frankly, Outlook is one of the products that Microsoft really has nailed down, and it's kind of worth buying if you need to use it. So that's my impression anyway. All right. So I'll give you the rest of this class period to work on the assignments that you don't have done.